Time now for our Friday panel of press gallery reporters. Globe and Mail Parliamentary Bureau Chief Bob Fife is here, and Bruce Campion-Smith, parliamentary reporter with the Toronto Star. Good to see you both. So we have late night TV hosts poking fun at Canada's Prime Minister now and the predicament he's got himself in. Donald Trump has weighed in on all of this now, Bob, and I guess I'm wondering how this, you think, affects Justin Trudeau's image that had been pretty sparkling on the world stage. How is it now?
Well, I think his image has been hurt probably far more on the international stage than it has been in Canada. He took a big hit on the India trip when he was dressed up on all those costumes. Internationally, he was denounced and mocked and laughed at. And now this wearing of the blackface is far more serious. It's not a joke. Mm-hmm. And, the BBC, Sky News, Al Jazeera, New York Times, CNN, Washington Post, all the clips that users ran from the late-night comic shows make him look really bad. And I think that's going to hurt his image internationally because many people saw him as, he's the next Obama in terms of the social progressive guy that's on the international
he talks
stage.
To on a world stage.
The world kind of loved the guy, but perhaps not so much anymore.
Bruce?
Yeah, I agree. Certainly, if the Liberals sort of survive this, win the election, he was the progressive voice in the world stage, and people, especially as we saw Mr. Trump take power, the rise of some of these right-wing populist movements, he was seen as a bit of a bulwark of that. Well, I think he's perhaps fatally hobbled. It makes it very hard for him to kind of lecture other countries or other world leaders on their issues when the moment he starts that, they're going to cue the photo of him in blackface.
Yeah, you could see it from Trump. I mean, he's seen Trudeau lecturing everybody on the world stage about being a progressive person and women's rights and all of this sort of stuff. And you know what? He's got a little thing in his eye as well, and it's making him look very good.
And you could say that with the Trump in the Oval Office question
couldn't
today.
Resist.
Yeah. I was hoping you wouldn't ask me that question, but thank God you did. But again today, questions, Bruce. So Justin Trudeau asked again today about are there other incidents? Are there going to be other incidents? And the answer is it's kind of not as far as I know, right, or that I can't recall.
And I can't make sense of that answer because for most people, these are the kind of incidents that would be you would stick in your mind. You would live in fear of them coming out. So how can you not? So that tells me that there might be more, and who's got these images, and perhaps in the timing of the release. So this may get really hang over his campaign. But we've seen he's now moved to the conciliation, atonement, and I think now it's going to be up to Canadians to kind of make their own judgment. That they knew that from past incidents that they may have had their doubts about his judgment. As Bob noted, the India trip, but they may like his policies. So there's going to be a tug of war between personality and policy. I think that voters are going to have to decide.
You talk about the outreach. We learned today, Bob, that he's going to contact Jagmeet Singh and they're going to have a conversation. It's kind of watched the way the day sort of changed here. So Jagmeet Singh this morning was, his office is talking to my office, and we're going to try and work something out, and it's going to be a private conversation, and I'm happy to have it. Later in the day, Jagmeet Singh is asked about it again, and it's going to be a private conversation, but I'm not going to become sort of a tool for the exoneration of Justin Trudeau.
And rightly so.
Yeah, I mean, how's that conversation going to go?
Well, I mean, look, he's afraid of what's going to happen at the debate if Mr. Singh does not shake his hand. And so he's trying to do some damage control before the October 7th debate. That's pretty obvious what he's trying to do. And I think he's also quite concerned that because the winner this week, I think we all agree, was Jagmeet Singh and the way he handled the blackface incidents with Mr. Trudeau. He spoke very heartfelt and eloquently about how racialized minorities feel and have felt for a long time when they get these kind of images. And I thought that was a shining moment for him, as an educational moment for me, and I think for many Canadians who just don't understand the feelings that visible minorities feel quite often about being stigmatized. And so I think he was the winner on this one, and I think that Mr. Trudeau has got to be very, very worried that some of those young voters and women voters and visible minority may go to the NDP.
Now see perhaps a different champion, Bruce. If Mr. Singh keeps
Yeah,
sort of
I agree.
clearly by most accounts he's kind of overperforming expectations. Certainly, I mean,
for the second week, he had a very good first, sort of first half week. He's now on the phone call. The one thing that did strike me is why wasn't Mr. Singh called in the first place? Why wasn't he? When they talked about the Prime Minister reaching out to Liberal candidates, community leaders, why was he not in the top 10 of that phone call? Why has he still not been contacted? But back to, I think Mr. Singh's had a very strong, he's kind of a very steady, strong performance, day in and day out. There's still a lot of road ahead. I think Mr. Scheer, I found his response, the second-day response, where he kind of hooked on in his view, the deception by the Prime Minister to not mention that third incident in the video. All of a sudden, you raised the question, well, is that now more problematic for you than the original, than the blackface? Right. And I thought he kind of lost the message.
These are really these are in the time we've all covered campaigns, these always strike me as the real challenges for political leaders, because they kind of come out of nowhere and they force you to take a little time, or should, to consider your options as someone who's in a position to either attack, defer, or do something when this kind of thing happens to an opponent, right? And they're challenging situations. Like your instinct is to say, there, we got somebody on the ropes, and yet there's another option.
Well, look, I thought the Prime Minister or the Liberal leader performed not very well on the night he was on the plane. He had to apologize. But yesterday, I thought he was much stronger, and he seemed to be more sincerely sorry for what happened. He didn't answer still a lot of the questions. But if you're looking at, and this is anecdotal, of course, but we've all looked at streeters, television streeters, and letters to the editor, and what you're hearing from people, particularly visible minorities, they seem to be willing to give him a pass on this. Now, it's early to say, because we don't know until we see the polls, which we probably have an idea probably Monday, get a sense of how Canadians actually feel about this. So he might have managed to escape this, but he's been damaged, and I think he's been damaged because he's no longer the authentic progressive that he claims he is.
Yeah, and I guess, in the context as well as, have we heard everything we're going to hear about it? And if there are other, images, then that's a different story, Brad. Let's talk a little bit about gun control and the proposal from the Liberals today to ban semi-automatic rifles and give communities the legislative powers to ban handguns. But they're not banning handguns federally. They've left that to the communities. What do you think of this proposal, Bruce?
Well, of course, big issue in Toronto and for the other urban centres. Where gun violence is a concern, and there seem to be incidents nightly. The policy seemed to be a bit of a, I think there's more sort of smoke there than fire. Especially around handguns, which I think are responsible for the vast majority of incidents. This notion that we're going to leave that to municipalities. So in effect, you're going to have a kind of a patchwork of rules that Toronto bans them, but not Mississauga, Burlington. So how is that workable? How is that actually going to decrease firearms? I think there should have been a national approach that they take the political heat that we're going to ban these. But of course, I think that's why they didn't. They don't want. They know there's a constituency out there that the Conservatives probably can seize on, and they don't want to really upset them.
Yeah, how big is that constituency, Bob? I guess, and could this be a defining issue in the campaign? Because it doesn't really show up in sort of national surveys of top priorities for people, but when it bubbles to the fore, it can tend to suck a lot of the oxygen in the room.
I'm not sure how big of a constituency it is. Certainly, when you see any polls, most people want handguns banned, and certainly that is the case in our major cities, where most of the gun violence is happening. They want handguns banned, and they want the federal government to take action on that. Certainly from the Conservative point of view, I guess in some of the rural areas they could play it up that they're going after your guns, but those are probably constituencies that are going to vote for the Conservatives in any case.
Right. And so is it the kind of, when people hear this conversation, I think a lot of people immediately think of comparisons to the U.S., where it is a massive issue and politicians are deeply funded by gun lobby groups and so on. Is it that kind of story here, Bruce? Is it, in other words, can outside groups have a huge influence in how this campaign could turn on something like gun control?
No, I don't think so. I think, Bob, it is. I don't think we have those sharp political lines around this issue. We don't have a powerful lobby like the NRA, like they do in the States, that's heavily funding, pouring money into political parties. So it does beg the question: why didn't they go further? Like what put the brakes on the policy? Why didn't they just ban handguns? Perhaps allow exclusions for gun enthusiasts who shoot at a club, that sort of thing. There's workarounds, but I'm puzzled why they didn't just go full step.
Let's finish on this, and it's because it's our business. We wait for election campaigns, and we wait to see what they're going to be like and how they're going to turn out and everything else. And I know I always watched for something that really sort of catches your imagination. Are you inspired by the campaign so far?
No, I haven't been. I mean, the first week of the campaign was most notable for mudslinging. The Liberals were having a field day going after Conservative campaign over instances of alleged racism and homophobia, making people resign and demanding they resign even when they apologize, and even when Mr. Scheer said, I'm not going to force anybody to resign anymore. If they're sincere in their apology, right. That's it. That wasn't good enough until Mr. Trudeau got caught on blackface, right. And then he's saying, well, you should accept people when they apologize. You should accept that. So I think the mudslinging stuff is probably gone. Earlier this week, we started to see some policy rollouts, Mr. Scheer's tax measures, right. Some of the affordability issues, both the Liberals and the NDP, and everybody's been putting out. And I think that's really good, because election campaigns are also supposed to be about policy and what each party is supposed to do for one another. So I thought that this week was much better. And then, of course, the big story hit, and that changed the whole game. Right.
And depending on how long that's with us, Bruce, we may get back to policy focus.
Yeah, I think if there's sort of a silver lining to the unfortunate images involving Mr. Trudeau, it's that this may kind of dampen the Liberal war room and kind of how they were tossing out sort of gotchas on the Conservative candidates. It's hard now for them to kind of point the finger at a Conservative candidate's background when their own leader is, really it's hard to do much worse. So I think we saw policy. I think it's also, I find it fascinating to see how the political leaders evolve, through the contest. Mr. Singh's been a surprise. I think Mr. Scheer, for his first contest as leader, he's been steady, and I think that's what they're steady as they go. And perhaps, they're hoping that Mr. Trudeau and the Liberals will just, veer into the ditch.
All right. Well, there's, what are we, day 10?
I've lost track. What's going to happen next week?
They just think last time at day 10 we only had 68 more days to go. Thank you all. Thanks both.
Thanks, Peter.